Hello, hello, hello. Hi everyone. So I am Sandy Rakowitz of One Heart Healing Center, and today I am speaking about talking with people and animals who have passed over, and what that's like, what it's about, and the why it's helpful and healing, and what it has brought to me and what it has brought to people who have been clients who have contacted me to connect with their animals who've passed over, to connect with people who've passed over, to work with, find a new way, different way, help in processing grief, and being able to move forward differently with this integrated into themselves. And so all of that's possible. And I know because that has been the case for myself. And since as I continue to process, because when someone dies, it's not just a connect or get through a certain period and it's once and done. It is an ongoing process, especially for those who you have been very close with. And so I've had a lot of experience with this personally, growing up, having many family members die by the time I was a teenager, and then also as an adult, a young adult, middle range adult, and as I am now. And this month, it's actually a 20-year anniversary for a very close friend of mine who passed away from very suddenly from a brain aneurysm. And if you've been following me in either my emails or on Facebook, I posted a picture of the two of us together. It was about a week before she passed away, my friend Barbara, my dear friend Barbara. And that picture was taken actually while we were at the Barbara Brennan School. We were both faculty, and we would meet for 2 days, all the faculty, before students arrived for their 5 days of training. And so Barbara and I had been roommates from our first class in our first year as students, and that's a 4-year program. So all through our 4 years, and then also in the 6 years that we were faculty. And so that's 10 years, and we would drive to school together when school was in Long Island, and then it moved to New Jersey. We both were living at that time in Vermont, and so we would drive from Vermont to Long Island, and then we would drive from Vermont to New Jersey and back. And we, once I moved to Virginia in 95, we continued to be roommates, but I missed driving with her. And so it's been quite a process. And although I've had many people and animals in my life die, I will say in terms of the people who've passed on, this connection, hey there, thank you, this connection with her, probably because, and I could ask about this, because of our connection and because of the work we were both doing personally, but also at the Barbara Brennan School, the nature of that work and connecting with the spiritual realms, as well as all the very deep personal process work, she's very available. And I remember hearing her say just the week before she passed away, her mom had passed away. I think it was that year. And she said to me, she turned to me, we were in our room, and she turned to me, she was on her way to the bathroom. That part doesn't really make a difference, but I was just remembering so vividly. She turned to me, and actually it was this way. She turned to me and she said, I feel closer to my mom now than I ever did while she was alive. And I looked at her puzzled, and I asked her about it. And she started, so we had quite a discussion about that. And it wasn't the first time she had said it, but we were we just had many talks that week in particular. I think partly because I had said that I was bringing my teaching at the school to completion, and so that was my last week teaching. That was a conscious decision on my part, and so we had the opportunity to be saying goodbye to each other, not because either one of us consciously knew that she was about to die, but it gave that opportunity to have goodbyes. And so in talking about this, I'm just connecting with her. And what I was saying, why I was giving that context is the work that we've done, and that context of how she knew that she was in connection with her mom who had passed over, and what that felt like to her. She was describing that, and how poignant that was the week before she actually died, and that gave me a sense of that possibility. And at that point, this was in 2001, in June of 2001, and at that point, I wasn't doing a lot of conscious connection with people who had passed. At that point, I was doing animal communication. I was doing animal communication. I wasn't saying publicly that I was doing animal communication. I was a graduate of the Barbara Brennan School at that point. Of course, I was faculty of the Barbara Brennan School. And so there were conscious connections with energy and nature and energy consciousness of things. But it was 20 years ago. And so it was, in a sense, at the, I wouldn't say at the very beginning, but at earlier stages of that, for myself and with other people and with animals. And I had been connecting with my own animals who had passed over, but it was at I would say in retrospect, at least how I'm remembering it right now, 20 years later, it was at more, shall I say, rudimentary stage. And when I look back over this process, I can see how her passage, along with many of my other animals and family members and friends and others, that each of those deaths has actually been part of the opening for me to be able to have that connection with them, to be able to, as my horse Ibis says, to continue the connection beyond when someone is in the physical. And so I keep tuning in and asking Barbara what else she'd like to add, and she's kind of prompting me to talk about this process, because it's when somebody comes to me for a session, for instance, to talk with their animal or to connect with a loved one, whether it was a person or an animal who had passed over, and their process, it can be like a one-time, often a one-off session, or for those people who work with me over time, it's not the only thing that people would work with. And so I don't have that same sense of progression of the relationship once someone has passed over that I have had the honor, the privilege of the gift of having with my friend Barbara and others, but she was a healer, and so is very attuned to evolutionary growth, which this is part of our own personal growth. And she's saying, "Atta girl." It's so funny to be doing this publicly and having that conversation and saying things out loud at the same time. And so I'm just going to close my eyes and center again for a minute. Because as I've said every week, here's yet another edge of opening, growing, being visible, these courageous acts, these courageous ways of being which go outside of the normal range, and just speak it like it is. You know, there were times through different cultures and countries and communities where what I'm saying and what I'm doing is not only forbidden, but you would be killed for it. And so, imprisoned, killed, right? Lots of historical things for that. And so that we live in a time where we can have these conversations, where I can do this as not only speak openly about it, but do this as a profession, is really quite remarkable. And I'm not the only one. I do it in, each of us does this in our own styles. And so this arc of relationship that I've had with her, and now also with my horse, who has since passed away about 1.5 years ago, where we definitely are continuing this conversations, continuing the connections, continuing the relationship, and continuing the growth. And at this 20-year marker with my friend Barbara, we knew each other for 10 years in the physical realm. And I think about the irony, the weirdness of this, and that now I've known her, have this relationship with her while she's not in her physical body for twice as long as how I knew her in her physical body, and for a span of 30 years. It's crazy. It's like boggles in the mind. And I first experienced this with some changes that I could feel with her that I've since noticed in other relationships with animals and people that I have known that have passed since then. And that is recognizing shifts that happen. And so one of the things, when someone dies, we have connections with them in the present, you know, through the physical realm, through our heart, and through how we relate to things, and how that is woven into and through our day-to-day life. Whether or not you see them on a daily basis, it still happens. And this, you know, and especially so when you live with someone and they pass, and how literally I describe it as the fabric of how you are has to change, because the energetics of those cords and those literal connections that you have that go in through, they're energetic, but they're through the front of your heart, through the physicalness into your body and being, and the emotions and thoughts. When someone dies, that has to change, because it's attached to someone through their physical body. And so these things happen automatically as when we are able to process grief and literally let them pass. Those cords will pass through the core of our heart and go out through the back into, and we can feel them differently when we allow that. And sometimes it's really, really hard to let that happen. And so she's saying to tell them about when you feel that pain. Yeah, this is something that I definitely experienced with my relationship with Barbara, and with anyone who has passed over for me. And I know that this is very typical. You think about them. So your habit is you naturally go to connect with them. This isn't necessarily conscious, but you go to connect with them and you look for them in the way in which you've known them, which is out and in through your heart. And then you feel that pain of that sense of loss, because yes, it has changed. And when you can breathe and cry and process and be with all of what that means for you, and it's a gradual process, it's not like necessarily a sudden thing, then as that passes through you, when you can think of them, it can flow with that process when we feel the extent of our pain, we are coming up into that place that feels separate because we're looking for that connection in the way in which we've known it before. And that's when we miss, like really miss what we've had. And there's that particular quality where you'll feel alone, you'll feel disconnected, you could feel lost. I remember when my dad died, which was, I don't know, a year and a half ago now. So it was before Ibis, maybe 2.5 years now. I can't keep time. Anyway, a while ago, I remember that sense of feeling lost. Like, wait a minute, what's going on? Like everything, like it literally, and how I've described it before this experience with my dad, it was like, where is everything? Like my orientation, I know this happens for others, orientation changes because how you have had everything structured in relationship with that person or animal is definitely changed. And sometimes for many, not always, but sometimes your sense of identity it's like, who am I even? And people will go through very deep, profound processes and changes. Not always, but that I have definitely seen that. And I know that I experienced that with my dad. It was super uncomfortable. And I remember having times where I would be in, deep tears and just feeling that pain, just feeling the pain and the angst and the missing him. And, when you want to say something to him, you call up and he's not there, or when you walk into the house and he's not in his chair, not there for the same, all those kinds of things, And I remember that with Barbara, and of course for me with Barbara, I wasn't going back to school, so I didn't have my school community surrounding me at the same time either. And at that time, there were also many other deaths that I was experiencing, so there was just so much that was happening, and it was different and challenging. And at that time, I was definitely in shock. I was there when she collapsed, and at the hospital, and with others also. Thank God. And but there were parts of me that kind of skedaddled out of my body, and and it took quite a long time to really even accept. Like there were parts of me that didn't want to believe it. And I say all these things to help normalize what that process is like, because these parts, a lot of people don't talk about, don't hear. And, there's culturally, it's gotten better, but, there's a lot of constraints around, get over it kinds of mentality. Like, okay, you've been grieving for a week, or you've been grieving for 2 weeks, get back to work and get on with your life, like get on. There's a lot of get on with it kinds of stuff. And I will say I don't hear that from people anymore in my life, because I've created a really different life these days than I was kind of growing up. But I know that people say those things to me when they come, and they're like, people just don't get it. They don't understand. And I think that that's really true. Unless you have had that depth of loss and been with it, it is hard to know what that's like. And it's uncomfortable to watch people in deep distress, right? And it will touch on wherever you don't like to go, and so that's when all those reactions kind of happen from people. And so what I was saying before about feeling changes happen in connection, and that is like when, I don't remember exactly when I started realizing this shift, and it was for me with Barbara, it was a very gradual process to be able to hear her, or hear her laugh, or to hear her crazy jokes again, like she had like like amazing sense of humor. Everybody that I talked to who knows her, who was friends with her, has a Barbara story that's like raucously crazy funny, and at least one, if not many. And but what I noticed is when I would go to connect with her, at some point something started to feel different. Like I couldn't, like I kind of started to get used to how I would feel her and or hear her or know her, and then it started to change. And at some point I realized, because I kept seeking the connection, at that point I was able to keep seeking the connection instead of go away from the pain of that, which was, it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal to be able to do those things. I realized she's like even more expanded. The feeling I remember at first was like, oh my God, it's like she's gone to a whole nother level. And that started helping me understand that when someone dies, it's not like a static thing, right? And it's helped understand, yeah, right? Somebody just had like a big, like, oh, exactly, right? Like little icon, what is it? Emoji on there. So I was responding to that. And exactly, it's like, so I was feeling like, my God, she's gone to this other level that I can't really comprehend it even. I can know it through my way of connecting with her, and that she feels different, and then I can hear or ask questions from that place and get to know different things. And it's still kind of beyond my comprehension, a lot of it, I gotta say. I'm just being very real with you. It's like I'm learning, and she's saying exactly that we still get to learn and grow together. And so it makes it bearable, it makes it possible to keep wanting that connection, and not the old habit of like, this is too much, or it's, which still happens. Like I was talking to one of our friends yesterday, and I was like, okay, that feels really overwhelming. I'm not gonna, okay, I'm gonna breathe through that. Okay. But it's like, these places, it's a big deal. It challenges our heart to continue opening. And I think that I know that having these connections brings such comfort, and knowing that there is a way to continue a connection. It's really one of the things that saved me, because, I realized, this took a few years, but I realized that part of me wanted to leave with her, and tried to, and like stayed out of my body, because it was unbearable to feel being here in the present physical realm and not know her here in those same ways, and not to be able to have that. Even though at that point, this was a long time ago, but even at that point, I was still able to connect with her. There's splits, parts of us can split off. And so I did a lot of work around that and bringing her back. And I've talked with other people, once I realized that, and kind of was able to work with that with myself, and call myself back home, and create that safety here inside of me, and my heart and my being, and be with that. Actually, it was a very young part of me that was triggered, that had many family deaths growing up, but that was also past life related, many other life soul issues that it was touching upon. And then I would start hearing other people say similar things, like, I just wanted to die. Like, I feel like part of me died when they died. things along those lines. And so that's workable. You don't have to stay in those places. And it does take courage. It does take a desire to want to shift from old patterns. And I think that that's been one of the keys for me that I really saw with my dad's death, that I was really determined to not go through this death with him, me experiencing his death in a way that I used to do death, which was to shut down and not be so functional. I mean, I could still work and do all those things, but a lot of me was really closed down, and to really hold back and go away. And, my world became much smaller and narrower with accumulation of those experiences. Oh, you're welcome, Emily. Yeah. And it's powerful to, I have such an abiding intention to keep growing no matter what happens. So this is part of that. And so what just happened when I paused, because I just felt Barbara just acknowledging that. She had a little message for me with that. Like raw in the moment, hey? So, so I kind of forgot where I was because that just poured through me. So I'm just going to sit with that for a minute, not try and push through it. And it's like this, the connections are like this. It's been 20 years and it's still ongoing process. Yes, I do still miss her. There are times when, like yesterday, I got mad at her. I was like, what? WTF? You have to leave. And she always, when I get to those places, which I do still get to at times, like she comes back with like all of the larger picture things, and it's just, this is what it is anyway. So, because when you get to those places, it's really some part of you doesn't want to go in even more. It's the, we as humans have so much fear, so many different types of fears around being in our hearts and feeling vulnerable and feeling left or abandoned or not loved, or, all the places that it goes through for people. And so it is really, I think, part of what the process is of connecting, and that everybody has the capacity to connect with loved ones who've passed over. Everyone. I don't. There are no limitations on that. The only limitation on that, and I say this to my clients, the only limitation is what you believe is the limit. That's really the only limit. It is literally the only limit. Working with that and through that can take more, but it truly is a reclaiming of your own heart. And we think that when we let go, some like erroneous thoughts are like, when we let go, that will sort of cut me loose from my connection with them. And it's actually the opposite. It's the irony. It's the medicine is to reconnect. We're all meant, that's the thing. We all feel in our human duality, feel the separate places of separation where we're not the same, where we're different, where we feel like you can't do something, where, you come up against those walls. Those are all places in our duality that are based on beliefs and how we have felt and experienced things, but it's not really the truth, the deeper truth. And the deeper truths are, and it's why Barbara wants me to be talking about this, is The deeper truth is that we're much larger. We are souls, and when we can connect with someone who's passed over, it helps us touch those places, and it actually is medicine for our hearts and our beings, and it is part of our growth, and it is part of us feeling that sense of contact and connection, not only in our own hearts with our own self, not only with that being, but with the all that is. It takes us more into that larger sense of unity. And that's the healing for all of us. Ongoing, every moment, every day, in everything that we do. That's really kind of what it all boils down to. And yeah. So lots keeps, it's like, and one other thing is, like, every time I talk with somebody who, you know, we were friends together with Barbara, or who, you know, anybody, this happens in any relationship, I'm just using this as a focal point. And I've seen this over and over again. I can see it in retrospect, like every time it's like, oh yeah, that conversation, I was different after that. It's a lot of times they're very subtle shifts, but every time we can give voice to these places for ourselves and what we need, and that these are truths for ourselves, and share in those things with another, then we do grow. It does help us open. It does help us shift. It's not always comfortable at all, as you can see, but and as I'm sure you've experienced, right? But it's so important, because this is our growth. When I look back to, you know, how I experienced my grandfather dying when I was 6, and that was a sudden death. And what that experience was like then, and the extreme reaction, shut down, kind of like almost hysteria that I went through, to how I go through people and animals dying now. Yeah, that's different. That's different, right? And it's through these passages with an intention, you know, like what I said with my dad, I'm not going to go through it how I've gone through it in the past. I'm not going to shut down. And I didn't do it how I've always done it. I did do it differently, and I'm still doing it differently. And in a weird way, it was also, this might sound weird to say, but it's true. It was also preparation for Ibis passing, a horse I'd had for 32 years, and being able to go through that with a whole different range of grace, really, that I could have ever imagined. Because 6 months before that, a year before that, I was still saying, I can't even imagine what it's going to be like without you, you know? And here I am, living, breathing, you know, still collaborating with him, ongoing. Do I miss him? Sure. There are times I walk into the barn to go see Zoe, and I'm just like, oh, right, Ibis isn't here. I can feel him, right? So, all big pieces. Let me see what Emily wrote. I want to prepare for when my parents transition and my dog. It was very hard when my former husband and child's father passed away. That was my first time. Yeah. So having that in your conscious awareness facilitates that, and you can bring that into private work also. But that's an intention, you know. And with everything, it's like, so what do you want to be able to feel? What do you want to be able to experience through these passages? Those are really important questions. And so there's lots of ways for people to get in touch with me. And I appreciate those of you who are watching live and those who are going to be watching afterwards. You can definitely feel free to keep making comments below. I'm going to be bringing this to a close for today. And I thought I was going to be talking more directly, like having more dialogue directly with Barbara, but I open and I connect. I open the Akashic Records and I ask what's most needed, and often it's stories that come through. It's a very interesting process that's been happening. It's different than when I'm in a private session with somebody. It's very, very interesting. So, you're welcome to contact me, to email me, Sandy at onehearthealingcenter.com. One is spelled out O-N-E. And my website, if you're not, and this is the thing, if you're not on my email list, you can do that from my website, onehearthealingcenter.com. Oh, good. I'm so glad, Chris. You're so welcome. Thank you. If you're not on my email list, I've got some really big things coming up. And the initial offerings are only going to be through my email list. And so you can be a founding member of this really big thing that's going to be happening if you'd like. And I'll tell you more as things develop. I've been in the process of for a long time of developing this, and it's like it's getting ready to come up through the soil and open up soon. So exciting, and a long time in the making. I know you're all gonna love it. Those of you who follow me also love to learn, so it's great stuff. And how else can you contact me? Those are the two main ways: email, through my website. There's lots of stuff on my website. You can have private sessions with me. I do have groups. Thank you for spending this time and sharing the journey, and peace and blessings to you and your beautiful, sweet, tender, loving hearts, and anything and all that you have been through and with your loved ones. And may this be of service for you and touch your hearts in helpful and inspiring ways. Mwah.